Hi, this is Nancy with On Point TV, and we are doing a Facebook Live again. It's a Saturday morning. It is still cold in Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's actually Easter tomorrow. Spring has happened a few days ago, and it's still cold in Grand Rapids. We are going to have spring. You have to trust me on that. And when we do, maybe we'll quilt outside. I don't know. So the episode that we played on Thursday night was about quilting your Lone Star quilt. And I showed you a quilt that I had done a lot of beading on. And I talked about how it bedazzled the judges. And I had quite a few people reply back, how do you sew those beads on that quilt? So our Facebook Live this Saturday morning is going to be sewing beads on a quilt. So these are the tools that we're going to use. So right now I'm going to take the phone from my son so that I can point to what we're going to show. All right, so there we are. All right, so here's just some of the tools that we're going to use. We'll start up here. This is the threads. You need to have a very strong thread for it to hold onto the quilt over time. I've used lots of different threads. I've had beads fall off. So these are two that I find work fairly well. This is a Nymo thread, which is N-Y-O-M. So I don't know if that's how you're supposed to say it. It is a very, very strong nylon polyester, I think, maybe. I'm not sure. But this is the type of thread that you will find in beading stores. They do, this is the predominant thread for beading stores, but it can be hard to find. So if you can't find that, this is the So Fine thread from Superior. This is a very strong 50 weight polyester thread, whereas quilting is all done with cotton. We know that, but for sewing on beads, use a polyester thread. You want it to be nice and strong. So these are needles. These are beading needles. Honestly, I find them to be a little bit too, they bend. They're just too bendy. So this one that I'm going to use, this one here, is a sharp. It is a number 10 sharp. It's a little bit longer than my betweens. I like to use that. And then here's some of the beads. So these are Mill Hill beads. I love Mill Hill beads. They're very, very high quality. The other thing I love about them that really might seem a little bit silly is that I can tell how many beads I've used on a quilt. When I'm done with the box, I know that I've used however many beads are in that quilt, or how many beads were in that box. This is a bugle bead. A bugle bead is going to be a long tube of a bead. The problem with those is that they're very sharp on the edges because it literally is a tube of glass that has been broken. If you're going to use those on your quilt, you need to do something like this, where you'll put a seed bead, a bugle bead, and then a seed bead, because if the thread is just going around the bugles, it will break the thread. Here is just some other, these are some hand-blown beads. Bigger beads are harder to sew on because they're higher up off the surface. I'll show you a little trick for using those. And here's just some other beads that I have. I am an equal opportunity bead girl. I'll use them all. I love buying them on the shanks like this. So here, I'm going to show you these are my bead containers. Yes, I have a problem. I know this to be true, but those are the beads, and I've probably been buying them for 15, 20 years. I am going to use my super simple thimble, and that's about it for the tools, and a pair of scissors, obviously. So this is the only quilt that I have in my house right now to show you that has beads. So this one I talked about sewing large beads on. You can't really sew large beads on all by themselves. They will just float above the surface. It really won't work that well. So here I added other beads to it, so that it kind of went from a small up to a medium and then to the large one. This is a wonky log cabin quilt that when we do our log cabin series, I'll show you how to do that. And then this is the first time on this, do you see around the edge? When I made this quilt, the whole rage, which really is still a pretty big rage, was the idea of putting a piping on your binding. Well, instead of a piping, because I got done with the quilt, didn't plan on doing it, but with those beads in the middle, it looked kind of silly with no beads anyplace else. So instead of a pipe binding, I did a beaded pipe binding, if you will. So that just kind of goes along the edges of it right there. All right, so now I'm going to transfer the phone back to Keith. There he is. All right, so I'm going to move this out of the way, and I'm going to do the stitching that we're going to do on that little sample that I did the quilting for the Lone Star on. So this is the sample here. I'm going to use that Nymo thread. I wish I knew exactly how to say it. I kind of feel silly not knowing. Uh-oh, where'd my needle go? It's a problem with doing Facebook Live. You're going to lose things. All right, so I'm going to thread that needle. I want to show you, first I'd like to show you how to thread a needle, but I'm having difficulty. Okay, I want to show you the knot. So Keith, can you get a really good close-up? So I want to be sure that the thread does not slide through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cast on. So I've made it so that the tail of the thread, oops. Okay, got to do that again. Try that again. Here. The tail of the thread needs to be inside that loop. So it's inside the loop. So now when I take that loop and bring it down to the bottom of the needle, that is locked on. I can pull this and pull this, and that is not going to come unthreaded. That's really important. I do that also when I do applique, but it's really, really important when you're doing beading. All right, so now I'm going to come back. I'm going to stitch with some of these purple size 11 seed beads. This is just a simple piece of wool setting here. Felt works really well for this. Just something, if you put it down on a hard surface, then the beads are just going to go rolling all the way off and the cats are going to eat them. So you don't want to do that. So I'll just lay it on a piece of wool like this or a piece of flannel. And I'm going to sew on one of these. So this is very similar to that quilt, that the Lone Star. So this is the quilting I did, and I had put the beads on each of the quilting lines. So we're going to start. I'm going to start stitching. I'm going to add beads to this long line here. I'm going to start with the thread or the needle away from where I actually want it to start. Oops, I don't have my thimble on. Ouch. Pull it through. There, now the tail is hidden. Now I'm going to take just another teeny little stitch right where I started and pass my needle through the loop, so that'll make my knot. All right, now I'm going to come forward the distance of or close to 3 beads. So I come forward about that far. Now I'm going to go and pick up 3 beads. 1, 2, 3. I find for me 3 beads works. If you do too many, the beads kind of get wobbly. So now I'm going back to where I started from. So here's where I came out. I'm going back here. Going to come forward the first time just to where I was before, because I want to pass through every bead 2 to 3 times. So now I'm just going to go right back through that bead again, or that line of beads. This time I'm going to come forward the distance of 3 beads, or close to it. Go a little farther than you think if you're wondering. Now I'm going to go back and pick up 3 beads. 1, whoops, and then they fling off into wild blue yonder. There, 3. Now I'm going to take and go through those beads again, but I'm not going to go all the way through 3. I'm only going to go through 2. So my needle is coming up through the second bead, pulling through. Now I'm going to go right back down, right into, so here I am between this number 1 and 2 bead. I'm going to go right back down and come forward the distance of 3 beads past my last bead. So now I've secured that set of 3 into now a set of 2. If you just do 3 bead, 3 bead, 3 bead, there's going to be like, the beads are just not going to be very secure, because it'll be 3 beads distance before it's secured down. So that's why I go through 2, pull it through, then come back down into the quilt, under those, and then come in the distance forward of 3. Gonna grab 3 beads. This will be my last time. I'm just not going to go all the way just for this particular demo. So here's where I go back into just 2 beads, not all the way through to 3, just to 2. pull it forward, and go down into, right straight into it. And oh, the needle is traveling between the layers. It is not going all the way to the back. It's only between the layers of the quilt. So after you've quilted, it's kind of into the batting. So now I'm coming forward the distance of maybe just 2 beads. This is going to be my last one. So pretend I'm at the tip. Again, I'm going to go back just into the 2. Pull it forward. Now I'm going to come right up to the end, just lining it up right where there at the end of that last bead. And now I'm going to travel the needle all the way to the beginning through the beads. So when you've got a long bead line, obviously you're going to have to go in and out a little bit. But by doing that, it fills the beads with thread and it straightens them all out. And then I'll go and put a knot here. Oops, let's get in there. Right there at the end again. Okay, gotta get more than one thread. There. And make a little knot, and then again travel the thread away from where you're going. And then that's where I will cut it off. So that is a very secure line of beads. If you ever decide to do beading on a quilt that's going to be judged, know that the judges are going to come and they're going to go like this over the top of every single bead to make sure it's secure. They love secure beads. So, all right. There you go. That is how I sew beads on quilts. I didn't say it at the beginning. I should have. You are sewing the beads on the quilt after it is completely quilted. If you sew beads on before the quilt is quilted, in the process of quilting it, you're going to hit those beads, you're going to break a needle, you're going to mess up your machine. So always sewn on after the quilt is quilted. I hope you enjoyed that. Maybe give it a try. Oh, one more thing. The reason you sew beads on quilts is just because. There's no other reason than just because. They're pretty. Just give it a try. I think you'll really like it. Have a great day.